Hello.
Hey, nice setup.
Thank you.
Yeah, it looks beautiful. Good job.
Thanks.
Hope you like mine
Yeah, cool background.
in cyberspace. How's it been? How have you been?
Um, well, yeah, I have been pretty well. Like, given the like what has been happening in the world, not complaining at all.
Yeah. I see your LinkedIn posts almost like every day. So I usually like look at it and think, wow, this is cool. Like it's a good way to start my morning, feel motivated. I feel like you're like the ultimate like motivated person.
Glad to hear that you have been finding the post useful. Yeah, it's usually Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. I was doing 5 times a week, but it became like too much content at a certain point.
Yeah. It gets hard to do content. Like I am supposed to do content for this group as well, and like I'm just kind of overwhelmed a little bit because I recently joined Beachbody, and so I'm working there, and it's like a new tech stack and everything. It's all React, but yeah, just like I knew like in my mind I'd need to like board for a little while and just really get up to speed with their stack, and then whenever I have time, I'll come back to this group. So I just have it sort of running on autopilot at the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but yeah,
So, for how long have you been on the new job?
I started in April, so
Okay.
maybe almost 3 months, 2 months, I
Yeah,
guess.
congratulations.
Yeah, it was like all of this, right? Like doing these meetups and definitely studying, but also like networking and learning from, all kinds of people, including yourself, that
Yeah.
got me to that newer job and like higher level, you know, work. So I'm just excited. I don't know. Maybe Beachbody can give Google a run for its money someday. I don't
Yeah.
know. That's what my CEO would like us to say. So, and I kind of align with the vision. But yeah, it's fun. I really enjoy like having you and Mark, especially that last time, come and give a talk on just Angular in general. Even though I'm using React, and I think like this group kind of tends to be React focused sometimes. I feel like React is still a tool, just like Angular is still a tool, just like Vue is still a tool. And so we're all engineers at the end of the day. And like our job is not like to sit there and like fight each other on tools.
Yeah.
Like I think it's more important to just think like at a higher level of like how do we use these tools and all the patterns that go on with that. So
Yeah, completely agree.
yeah. So we're just getting started. I'm gonna give people time to like come in and flow in. We do have a lot of signups, so I expect a lot of them to just start rolling in as we do it. I think we have some people from farmers also coming in. And so if they come in and they say hello, just kind of let them uh, give a little spiel, because I feel like they're the sponsor for the group. And so we want to make sure that we, get whatever needs to be done with that. So I'll also open it up real quick to anybody else who wants to just say hi, hello, how's it going? It's been a while. Always love touching base with everyone. We do have some people in the chat. Sam, good to see you again. Thank you so much for showing up. If anybody else wants to, for people coming in, anybody else wants to just say hello, feel free to say hello. If not, then I'll go ahead and just do like a quick spiel on JavaScript LA as well, just so people know what that is. And then we could get to Minko. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. And then I'm also gonna make sure that you have the ability to do that as well, Minko. So let's just make sure that you can do that.
Yeah, I have access.
Perfect. Okay, so what is this group, right? A lot of people are, new to the group, and I think there are people who are also seasoned people, but you know, stuff changes from month to month, and so I just want to get everybody back on the same page. The group is still called JavaScript LA/HackBuddy. Your best source of information right now is the JavaScript LA website, javascriptla.net. And today, if you didn't know any better, right, tonight's meetup is Intro to Chrome DevTools. And so if you ever are interested in our meetups and you want to learn more about what we do, basically the premise of the group is that we're trying to help people become better at coding. JavaScript just tends to be like the language we chose. But over time, you know, we are looking more at engineering because, as I mentioned to Minko, that it's not just about like one language versus another. It's really like the thinking patterns, the programming patterns, all of that is pretty much like similar across the board. And so it's really cool to have Minko here from Google. He's going to talk about Chrome DevTools. If you like this meetup and you want to network with us afterwards, please click on any of the banners you see that say Discord or Slack. That's your best bet with getting into this group and being able to talk to me and, you know, some of the other people in this group. We have a lot of different conversations going on. We also have people programming, which is new. That's like a new thing in the group itself. And so there's a new part of the group we created called Team Hack, where we're learning to code in an open source fashion. So for a lot of the people out there who are learning to code and want to do it at a more professional level, where you make pull requests and you work with, you know, different repos, and you know, you learn things like TypeScript, you can learn things like React or Angular, any of the things that you see in practice here, right? Like, it's one thing to watch a meetup, which is really cool, but I feel like, you know, it's better to practice it too, you know, because like I mentioned to Minko, you know, someone like myself, right? Like I only got to the job that I'm in, which is, you know, at Beachbody now, which is cool. And like, I only got to that by like actually practicing and learning to code the proper way. And I lean on people like Minko and, you know, some of the other people in our network to learn how to do stuff better. So Team Hack is an implementation of that. You can come and you can check out some of the issues if you're interested. You can get involved in that, learn how to code with issues, pull requests, and then take these skills that you learn and transfer them to the real world, whether that be going and working at Google or working at Beachbody or anywhere else. We just want to help people get better, and this is one way to do it. As always, slides are available on our github.com/hackbuddyorg link over here. And so you can see the last one from James Dabb, which was our previous meetup over there. And we also have a YouTube channel if you want to rewatch these videos. I agree, sometimes it can get confusing, like wondering what did you just watch? So you can come here and check out some of the videos, as well as tips and explanations on like JavaScript by me and React and a lot of cool stuff. So definitely check it out. If anybody has any questions, feel free to message me within the chat. I am available also by LinkedIn if anybody wants to network. So I'm going to put that as well in the chat. And I'll also put in all the links that I discussed today. All right. We can get started with you, Minko, if you're ready to go.
Sounds good. Let me share my screen.
Perfect.
All right. Okay. Yeah, I assume you see my screen?
Yep.
Great. So yeah, hello everyone. My name is Minko Gechev. I'm working on Angular at Google. Today I would want to make a very informal introduction to Angular DevTools, which is a Chrome DevTools extension that we released on Google I/O 2021, just about a month and a half ago. I'm going to make a mostly like practical introduction. We're going to look at what Angular DevTools is. We're going to look at how we can understand the component structure of our applications, how we can profile its performance. We're going to compare it with Chrome DevTools. We're going to see what are the differences between these two tools and when you should be using one rather than the other. And this will be probably in about 15 to 20 minutes. I'm hoping after that we can spend some time just discussing anything Angular related. Currently, the topic is Angular DevTools, but if you have any other questions or feedback about Angular, I'll love us to spend some time chatting about that. All right, so Angular DevTools. As I mentioned, it is a Chrome DevTools extension, so you should just go to Chrome Web Store, type Angular DevTools. Let me zoom in a little bit. Angular DevTools, and you're going to find it right here. When you add it to Chrome, you will be able to start debugging. So you can see that Angular DevTools appeared up here at the top right. It is probably very tiny on your screens, but trust me, it is in there. Now, if you go to an Angular application, let's say Angular IO, and we pin the extension, we're going to see that it lights up as it colors as red because it recognizes that this is an Angular application. However, Angular IO is a production application that we have optimized, and we removed all the debugging APIs out of it because we want to make sure we're providing it with the smallest bundle possible. So this doesn't allow Angular DevTools to provide us further insights into the framework. We can notice that when we go to Chrome DevTools, when we click on Angular, that says that we're detecting that your application is built with production configuration. So DevTools would unfortunately not be able to build it. If we, however, go to Angular IO again, but this time running in development mode, we'll preview something completely different. This here in the components. So first of all, we see a couple of different icons here. We see the inspect element, which is pretty similar to the select an element page here in Chrome DevTools. We see that we have some settings. Dark mode is enabled by default. We can also enable comment nodes if we want to. We see a bunch of like an info panel and two tabs, the components and profiler tab. In the components tab, we can see the nested structure of our component tree. It is very similar to the elements tab right here in Chrome DevTools, but rather than showing individual DOM elements, Angular DevTools entirely focuses on elements that have directives or components attached to them. And when we click on any of these components, we can preview their properties here. Their properties or even their inputs if they have any. Let's see which one has inputs. Here is the navbar item has an input, has a couple of inputs, for instance, is parent expanded, is white, and so on and so forth. When we click right here, we can also preview the configuration of this component. We can see, for example, that it uses the default view encapsulation, actually view encapsulation none. And we can also see that it is using the default change detection strategy. When we click on any of these things, we're going to get redirected to the documentation so that we can, if we're new to Angular, we can understand what this actually even means. This is the basics of the first part of DevTools that we're going to look at, actually, the components tab. It is mostly useful if you would want to understand the structure of your app, if you want to see where the individual content gets rendered, or if you want to see how it relates to the DOM elements in the Elements tab. For instance, if I double click on this element, I'll find it directly in the Elements tab, and I'll be able to, let's say, edit its styles here in the sidebar, or interact with the actual instance of the Angular component that is associated with this entry right here. So we can do something like ng0. Let me zoom in a little bit more. And this is the actual navigation item component that has a prototype, for instance. And this prototype has a bunch of different methods that we have declared. Yeah, I guess this is mostly the complete functionality of the Angular DevTools component tab. Most of this presentation, though, we're going to spend in talking about runtime performance, because this is a common challenge that as developers we're having to deal with on a day-to-day basis. Very often, it doesn't matter on the technology we're using, our clients are saying that, let's say this input here is a little bit laggy, or scrolling down the page feels sluggish and suboptimal. So in order to understand what is actually going on in our application, we can use different tools for runtime performance profiling. Angular, usually the suggestions to fix runtime performance problems is to do less, right? If we're doing fewer computations in the browser, generally our application is going to get faster. But doing fewer computations in the browser, sometimes it's not really possible because we still need to provide functionality to the user. We can apply this do less advice to optimizing our application's bundles performance as well, like load time performance. We can add fewer libraries and don't use a framework and don't ship JavaScript, and we're going to be really fast. But well, we will not be also providing the functionality that users need. So in order to do less and see what we can do less of when building a web app, we can use tools like Chrome DevTools. So Chrome DevTools is probably the most advanced debugging tool that you can find. Firefox DevTools is doing a fantastic job as well. I believe Safari has really nice debugging tools too. But let's say that Chrome DevTools is my area of expertise. Here in Chrome DevTools, you can see and inspect the individual function calls that have happened in your application through a certain period of time. You can dig into the runtime of the framework that you're using. You can see the individual function invocations in the third-party libraries that you have in your application. You can see your application code as well. You can even peek into the runtime of the JavaScript virtual machine. So if you enable a couple of settings in Chrome DevTools, you'll be able to see how much time the JavaScript virtual machine spends in garbage collection to get rid of memory that you're no longer using. And it will be also able to show you how much time it spends in just-in-time compilation of pieces of your code so that it can execute them faster. And all this is fantastic, but it could be a little bit overwhelming. If we just want to see why the change detection of our application performs a little bit slower, it might be overwhelming for us to start digging into these flame charts and figuring out the individual function invocations. For instance, out of everything right here, what we're really interested in as application developers using Angular are these light blue calls right here. For example, the get aggregate and the home components template. That's all. And we have a lot of redundant information that could be very useful for us as framework developers. On Angular, we're constantly digging into these flame charts, but maybe not as useful to just quickly preview what are the performance bottlenecks of your app. However, at the same time, you can use definitely Chrome DevTools to profile your applications. And I gave a talk about this on Angular Enterprise a couple of months ago now, in November 2020. Which talk would be applicable not only for your Angular debugging needs, but also you'd be able to apply it for your framework of choice. So if you're interested in learning more about flame graphs, flame charts, if you want to know more about the different debugging capabilities of Chrome DevTools, I would recommend you to check this talk out. Today, we will primarily focus though on the Profiler tab in Angular DevTools. When you click on the Profiler tab, you'll be able to start recording. And after that, you can start interacting with your application. So as you're interacting with your application, Angular is going to run change detection in order to figure out what part of your data model has changed so that it can reflect these changes in the view. And when Angular does this, Angular DevTools is showing a new bar right here. Each individual bar that we see here at runtime and like at real time that shows up is just a change detection invocation. The higher the bar is, the more time you spend in change detection there. And the darker its color is, the more time respectively we spend there. And eventually we might have been even dropping frames in the darkest ones. So if we click on this bar right here, we're going to see that we have spent about 41 milliseconds in change detection, which reduced the frame rate to about 15 frames per second. On average, like usually, if we want to have good user experience, we would want to have a frame rate similar to the monitor's refresh rates to be about 60 frames per second. However, at a certain point when we start having very heavy computations, since JavaScript is single-threaded, the browser would start skipping frames, and it will start dropping them usually by half. So in this case, we spent over 16 milliseconds for sure. So we dropped from 60 to 30 to 15 frames per second. And if the user performs some intensive operations that require high frame rate, we may notice that the behavior of the application looks a little bit laggy and not as pleasant as we would want it to be. So in Angular DevTools, we can click on any of these bars and figure out what exactly is going on there. In the bar chart below, we can notice the individual components that we run change detection for in this change detection cycle. So we spent the most time in the home component. Right after that, we spent some decent amount of time in the different ng4s. In the home component, we notice that we are spending most of our time in actual change detection. It could be either change detection or lifecycle hooks or some other application development code. We spent about 32 milliseconds. And in order to be able to identify which home component is that, we can see its parent hierarchy as well. So this home component is under the router outlet, and the router outlet is under the app component. In Angular DevTools, we can also preview where exactly we performed change detection. So for instance, here, when we click on Show Only Change Detection checkbox, we can see which are the components which were checked for changes and which other components were skipped. This is primarily useful when you're using on-push change detection and you want to figure out what has been going not as you expected in your change detection invocations. All right. So very frequently, based on my observations and thinking about Angular over the past years, I noticed that applications which regress in runtime performance fit into one of these three different buckets. They either perform a lot of unnecessary change detection cycles, which is not terrible all the time, but it could get quite inconvenient, especially if your application grows and you have many components. You may be having very slow computations that you're binding to, and this may respectively slow down your entire rendering of the application because these bindings need to be re-evaluated on every change detection cycle. And also large component trees. If you have thousands or like tens of thousands of component instances on the page, even if they're very well optimized, sometimes the browser just has certain capacity and it would not be able to detect them all for changes. In these cases, there are some more creative patterns that we can use in order to speed our applications up a little bit. But it is very convenient to know about these three different performance patterns, be able to identify in which one of these we're fitting in, and know the couple of different resolutions that we can apply in order to improve our runtime performance. So let us look into the unnecessary change detection cycles first. Here, by unnecessary change detection cycles, we can very easily recognize them by having a look at how many change detection cycles we performed in general. If we just open our app, we interacted a little bit with it, maybe for a couple of seconds, and we see 100 or a couple of hundreds of change detection cycles, this is probably a sign that we're performing a lot of redundant work that we really don't need to. Very frequently, these redundant change detection cycles are either triggered by request animation frame, set timeout, or set interval. Just different ways for us to schedule macro tasks in the browser. So the most common scenario that I have seen this being the problem is when we're using a third-party library. This third-party library is using request animation frame to schedule some work, which triggers the Angular's change detection and creates a lot of redundant computations that could have an impact on our performance. The usual way to do this is just initialize this third-party library outside of the Angular zone. Just inject the Angular zone and call run outside of Angular. And if your third-party library is doing this set time request animation frame initialization within this block, you would be safe and you would no longer have to be performing this unnecessary work. Okay, so the second pattern, which is probably the easiest, well, it is probably the second easiest, I guess, to fix, is having slow computations. Let's say we are building a business application where we need to calculate the performance of an employee based on multiple different values that we aggregate based on variety of different variables taken from the past tens of years. And this could create a very complicated calculation at the end that takes a couple of milliseconds to complete. If we use Angular DevTools and we bind, and in our application we have directly bound to this heavy computation, we'll see something like this here. So here we notice that our home component is taking about 41 milliseconds to get checked for changes. And these 41 milliseconds are actually only, well, in this case for the home component, it is only 32 milliseconds. We have spent them entirely in the template of the home component, only for detecting for changes. This means that there is probably something that we can do in order to optimize the calculation. Now, the optimization of the calculation is going to vary a lot across applications. You can use a variety of different techniques there. For example, using a pure pipe would allow you to perform the calculation only once, and right after that, Angular is going to reuse the exact same results as the first one that it calculated if you didn't change the arguments of the pipe. You can be using memoization with the memo decorator, or you could be just optimizing the associated algorithms. There are a variety of different approaches you can use here. If, however, you still have a very heavy computation that takes a couple of milliseconds to complete, I'll just recommend you to move it to a web worker. The web worker will be able to complete the calculation, return it to the main thread, and you'll be able to just visualize it. That's it. In Angular, it could be very convenient also to wrap such heavy computation in a web worker, but wrap it in a pipe so that the pipe does not have to call the web worker every time, even though the arguments have not changed. All right, and probably the most challenging issue is when we have large component trees. Because at certain points, if we have a very complicated screen with hundreds of thousands of components maybe, well, and they're all optimized, there is nothing much we can do but just show fewer of these components. We can look at Angular DevTools and we can explore either the flame chart view here or the bar chart view of all the different components that perform change detection. And we can see how much time we spent in the individual components. If none of the components is striking us at something that required a lot of time to get checked for changes, then probably we are in this scenario, specifically if we're also dropping frames. So there are a couple of approaches here. We can use on-push change detection, or we can use something like virtual scrolling. But in order to understand how to use on-push change detection strategy efficiently, let me make a very brief overview of how Angular change detection works. So here we have a parent component and a bunch of child components. Let's say this is a user list, and the child components here, which are represented with different circles with the C label. They're just different users in this list. So first, Angular is going to check the parent component for changes. It is going to go through all the bindings that the component has in the template. It is going to reevaluate them. And right after that, it is going to go through all the children components one by one. It's interesting to point out that often to detect for changes could be expensive depending on the number of bindings you have in your template. However, Angular provides this on-push change detection strategy that allows to skip the current component in its component subtree. So you'll be able to skip the parent components and all the child components. And this would happen if you pass inputs that are the same as the previous inputs when Angular compares them with a reference check with triple equal. So if you're using on-push in this case, it will be very cheap. Your child components would not have to be checked. There is only a single comparison that Angular does in order to see whether their inputs were different from the previous ones. However, if you're using the default change detection strategy, things could be a little bit more heavy. Something that you can use is take as many of the components with default change detection strategy as you can and move them under a component with on-push change detection strategy. This way, when Angular detects for changes the parent component, it is first going to compare its input with its previous inputs. And if they're the same, you're going to entirely skip change detection for all these three components on the left-hand side. All right, so as a recap for large component trees, you can definitely use on-push change detection to skip cycles. And you can also work on making the component tree smaller so that you can improve initial rendering and also the subsequent change detection invocations. How to make the component tree smaller though? Because when you create many components, you can have very expensive initial rendering as well. So the first time you initialize tens of thousands of components, even though Angular is very well optimized, it still needs to create a bunch of objects and it still needs to render some stuff onto the screen. The fewer things you have, the fewer things Angular will have to process, and it will from there on have efficient rendering. So a couple of techniques that you can use is virtual scrolling. If you have lists with thousands of items, you may consider using virtual scrolling. For instance, in Angular DevTools, we're using virtual scrolling on a couple of places that I can show you in a little bit. You can use also pagination, or you can render on demand. For instance, you can have an intersection observer, which is a DOM API that allows you to figure out which elements are currently visible in the viewport. And if something is not supposed to be used until it is visible, you can just delay its initialization. So you can have this intersection observer look into the viewport, and if certain component is supposed to get into the viewport at a certain point, you can initialize it lazily so that the user can use it, so that it is available for the user, but to not cause any additional cycles on your machine if it is outside of the viewport. All right, that's everything I had for you. I'll just quickly go through the virtual scrolling features that I mentioned, and we're going to do a very quick profiling of Angular IO to show you how DevTools works in real life. And I'll suggest to move to questions after that. So this here is, as you can see, there are quite a few Angular components. Let me grab the scroll bar. Also hard to grab the scroll bar here. Yeah, there are quite a few Angular components. And at certain points, Angular DevTools renders only these couple of components that are visible in the viewport. Everything else is being rendered on demand. With virtual scrolling, we're calculating which components are supposed to be visible when we reach certain distance from the top in the scroll bar, and we're rendering them this way, and we're recycling them. I mean, we're not initializing them from scratch every time. We have the exact same functionality here in the profiler. So when I click on, for instance, on the documentation page, you see that we rendered quite a few. We run quite a few change detection cycles here. So we can potentially have many change detection cycles. We can have thousands of them. And we really don't want to render thousands of different bars here at the same time, because it could be heavy for the browser. Just having thousands of different DOM elements, the browser may struggle rendering this number of items, so it may start lagging. What we're doing here is only rendering the minimum amount of number of items that are currently visible in the viewport. And when the user scrolls, we're calculating which these items are and showing them respectively. Yeah, I guess that's it. Here in DevTools, we can also specify what we want to see and what we don't want to see. Let's say here I'm seeing only change detection cycles that were triggered by promise then. If I want to see all the other change detection cycles, I can just prefix it with an exclamation mark, and this is going to be the negation of the condition. And if I want to see how much time I spent in two change detection cycles together, I can just select them at once and or remove some of the selection. Yeah, that's pretty much all the functionality that DevTools provides. Let me know if you have any questions about DevTools or about Angular in general.
Hey, Minko, great presentation. Short and to the point. It's really awesome. Let me just go ahead and so we'll open up for questions. I got a few questions of myself. I'll go ahead and give it to the audience first. If anybody wants to ask any questions, go ahead.
Is this an add-on? I missed the beginning of the presentation.
Yeah.
Is it an add-on? Okay.
Yeah, you can go to Chrome Web Store and install it there. It's Angular DevTools. Should be the only one.
And this was great. If we wanted to explore it further, are there any tutorial videos out on like any like YouTube or Pluralsight or anything like that?
Yeah, let me share. There is only a 2-minute video actually, which might be less exhaustive compared to what I show here. And it's by me, so you're gonna see me with the exact same background behind me.
Good, self-promo. Yeah, do it.
I believe also a couple of GDs Google Develop. Oh yeah, here is this one too. I noticed it afterwards. And this person actually did way better job. He discovered some of the features that we implemented and didn't show to anyone. So that was pretty impressive.
So it's a great tool. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Any other questions so far? Feel free to like ask a question in the chat. I got some questions for you too, Minko. Just in general, like you were showing the flame charts, and I thought that was really, really cool. I was wondering, like, do you have any more resources on that, or can you share with us some of those resources that you showed in the tutorial?
Yeah, the resources, for example, on debugging with Chrome DevTools, right?
Yes.
Yeah, this is all available in the Angular YouTube channel. So if you go to youtube.com/Angular, you'll be able to find all the videos there. We're posting a video, let's say, mostly weekly. Around I/O, we're a little bit less consistent.
Perfect, perfect. And yeah, some of the stuff that I saw, like it's similar like to what you might do with React, where you're kind of using like the use memo hook, where you're also optimizing a little bit for expensive calculations and trying to make sure that, you know, like your app is not like hogging up that flame chart. That's essentially where I would like kind of see some of those use cases. Do you feel like there are any companies out there besides Google, or I guess if it is Google, like what are some projects or like companies we can look at that are like extensively using like these tools, these dev tools that you're describing?
Yeah, they're
in a good way.
Yeah, the Angular DevTools is brand new. It's about a month old. There are about 60,000 people who are currently using it based on the Chrome DevTools, based on the Chrome Web Store statistics.
Right.
I don't know which exactly they are. I know which are like, I know about who could be like Angular customers, for example, like big airlines or banks. My guess is that some of their development departments just installed Angular DevTools as well. So yeah, especially around Google, because we have been dogfooding Angular DevTools for the past year there. We got Google Analytics. They provided us very useful feedback on what they found to be valuable for them and what could be improved. We also got feedback from Google Cloud. They have been using Angular with DevTools in a massive application that is maybe, every time I check it, is with 1 million lines of code larger than it was before.
I was gonna ask you, like, is this like, I mean, I'm not sure, but maybe is this being used across the gaming side with Google? Like, do you know anything about that side?
About what is it? Stadia?
Yeah, Stadia. Yeah, Stadia, I think.
Maybe. Actually, I'm not in touch with Stadia. I'm mostly talking to are like development platforms. I know it is in use for Google Home as well. So the shopping list that Google Home provides, it's an Angular application. Google Domains uses this as well. Quite a few Google products.
Is there anything that like people can look at, like, I guess, because you showed at the beginning, I think, like there's a feature flag, I believe, that if you're in production, you can't see anything. But if you're working locally or in development, you can kind of see some of the component tree and like how the charts are running. Like, is there anything open source that Google is allowing kind of like the public to look at, you know, to kind of get an idea of how to use these things better?
You mean everything that we're building is open source, or you mean any applications specifically? Any
applications specifically, yeah. But they could be related to open source if that makes it easier to answer the question. Yes.
I don't know about any. Oh, maybe a code search right now. Yeah. So we have a large monorepo, maybe a couple of at least 10 billion lines of code for sure, and we have a view similar to the GitHub source view. And it is an Angular application, which I believe should be somewhere on GitHub.
Cool. We'll find it. We'll get it out to this group. I have some questions from the chat. Let's see here. So Frank says, thank you. Eric says, is your camera running at 24 fps or on a filter? And then
I believe
Ken.
24, yeah.
Then Ken says, are there any Python modules or tools you'd recommend for interacting with Angular elements on a web page for automation purposes? Maybe some context, Ken, if you want to open your mic to that particular question.
Oh, sure. So if I'm on a web page and it uses Angular JS, and I wanted to use it to navigate a web page to download reports, is there anything you guys would recommend?
Sorry, would you repeat the last part of the question?
Oh, if I wanted to navigate to a web page or a portal where I download reports, and that web page has Angular JS elements in it, are there any like Python modules, like say for like if I'm using Selenium to navigate, or any tools you recommend to just navigate a web page with Angular JS elements?
Yeah. Is this for testing, or are you building some kind of like automation, just scraper, or?
Just basically for testing. Like ideally, we just want to like have like a web page just automatically navigate to where it needs to be to just download reports, and I could just pick them up later.
And when the user visits this page, you need to redirect, or you want to build a script that goes to this page and like navigates somewhere else?
Just goes to the page and navigates somewhere else. There would be a link to download reports. Wasn't sure how to interact with the Angular JS elements on that page. So I'm not sure if you know, but just pick your brain.
I see. Well, like if you just want to redirect, then maybe you can use just redirect for like just redirect headers in your page if you just want to do that. If you otherwise, yeah, with Selenium it would work. I believe that there should be a Python wrapper around the Selenium, or around the WebDriver that you could use for the purpose. For testing, I guess I'm giving the 3 answers anyway. For testing, we're currently recommending Cypress or WebDriver IO, or any of the alternative tools that are currently like popular in the JavaScript community. But it looks like for your case, just a wrapper around WebDriver would be enough, right? Let me check. Yeah, looks like there are quite a few projects on GitHub. Wrappers of WebDriver around with Python.
Excellent. Does that answer your question, Ken, by the way?
Yes, thanks.
Okay, cool.
And yeah,
go ahead.
Anyway, I was also going to ask if the challenges there with AngularJS are around like not being sure when it has completed change detection, or It shouldn't really matter though whether you're using AngularJS or Angular on the page if you just want to build a kind of a scraper.
By the way, hopefully, does everybody here on the call know that Angular is different from AngularJS? There's two separate projects. Correct me if I'm wrong, Minko?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. Yeah, Angular is the newer version, and then AngularJS is kind of like a legacy version. That's still supported, but everybody interested in the stuff that we're showcasing today should be looking at angular.io. I want to ask the audience, if anybody here has any more general questions, especially with Angular itself, or maybe if you still want to ask questions about the dev tools, that's totally fine. Use this opportunity pretty much to ask whatever you might be thinking about, especially if you're trying to become a better coder as well too. And while you guys are thinking, I just want to ask Minko, so with these dev tools, right, you have things that are going on, I wrote some notes down for myself. You have obviously the web workers, the on push, testing. Testing was something I wanted to ask you about. How are you doing testing? The Angular
for
application.
For DevTools, I'm using Cypress.
Mm-hmm.
And also writing a bunch of unit tests with Karma and Protractor. So DevTools, yeah, DevTools is an Angular application, as you said. It is using the Angular CLI pretty much. It's pretty interesting actually. If you look at it, there are at least 3 different projects for which compose together create DevTools. One of them is the DevTools, the UI, which is very actually 4 projects, which is just it could be distributed. It is just the DevTools component. It's ng DevTools component that you can use on any page, and you can just put it in there. There is the shell for Chrome, and there is an iframe shell, so that you can embed DevTools into an iframe if you want to. And there is also one more project that is just the debugging APIs that Chrome DevTools injects into the page. And for the different parts, we're using different testing tools, but primarily Karma and Jasmine for unit testing, and Cypress for end-to-end testing.
Got it. And so is there any reason for using Karma and Protractor over Jest, which is something that React uses, I guess, a lot?
Either would work. We just have built-in support for Karma and for Jest, for Jasmine and Karma.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
I guess one advantage, I really love Jest, by the way. One advantage of Karma and Jasmine that we found is that it runs the tests in a real browser. So if the browser has some glitches, this will be called by the tests.
Right. One thing about testing, and I guess maybe this could be a whole other topic, right? I found that, so in the last year, I actually got really deep into the world of testing. It wasn't something that I had been doing a lot at the previous company, but I was just really interested in getting up to speed with everything that I was learning about testing, unit tests, end-to-end tests. And I think one thing that kind of came up was implementation details and getting stuck in all that, especially with trying to mock components. How does Angular handle that, especially since you're using these Jasmine and using Protractor tools?
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, we are recommending dependency injection. That's core piece of Angular. And if you're using dependency injection, it is very easy to mock different services that are talking over the network or using browser APIs that you don't want to be using. So that's pretty much it. I guess you can inject props in React too, or use context, and you can do the alternative things in Vue and Svelte and other frameworks. I guess the difference is that Angular provides this out of the box by default. So that's why actually we're that's something that we're working on, just to provide a set of practices that we believe are best practices from the start, so that people can they can support people in the long run.
Sure. Yeah, I feel like that's a good area maybe to kind of like do a talk in, or at least look in, because one of the big projects that kind of came out like in recent years is this React testing library, which I think has made it easier to do testing, especially like with hooks and stuff like that. So again, just comparing notes across the board. And I have seen the intersection observer. So that's something that was cool that you brought up. Again, like if you have any like guides or tutorials and things like that, that would be great, like for the group. We have one more question here. How is your work on the technical side of testing and tool development, and how much of it is dev related and getting the word out about tools you develop? So I guess maybe he's asking how much you balance between being an evangelist and also like doing the real work.
Yeah, that's a great question. It very much depends on the priorities we set for the team. So around the release of DevTools, I've been working, about 90% of my time I was spending on just writing code, and 10% of my time I was spending on just maintaining connections with people, talking to customers, meeting with other teams. Right now, over the past month, I would say that I wrote code just a couple of times. So I haven't been writing code as extensively. And next quarter, I'll be also spending a lot of time talking to people just to figure out what are the best solutions for certain like type of problems that we'll be solving. And once we define the requirements, it's going to go to a more like technical kind of a role where we'll be writing a bunch of code in order to implement the feature that we agreed is the best practice.
Yeah, he's pretty impressed. You have a team. By the way, Minko is actually pretty impressive. He has like an extremely impressive profile. He's already won a lot of awards at Google, and I think you got the award from the president of Bulgaria, right? For a lot of your work. So this is one of the top-notch people, like probably in the world, that we're talking to right now. So it's like really awesome to just network and have this connection. Yeah, you know what? So Sam says you look cool, too cool to be a geeky coder. One thing that I've been finding out is like a lot of the coders who started off looking geeky, I guess like as they got money and like awards and fame, like they started like focusing on looking good again. Like I remember I saw like I don't know who it was. I think it was like a Next.js, the guy who runs Next.js or something like that.
Guillermo.
Yeah, Guillermo. Like he's like ripped now. I think he has like a six-pack and like big arms and stuff like that. And I was like, oh my God. And same with Jeff Bezos, right? Like he's like big and fit now. Like, so I don't know. Like it's
well, I've been doing karate for longer than I've been doing software engineering. I've been doing karate for almost 23 years now.
That's cool.
This has been what has been keeping me in shape.
Do you watch Cobra Kai?
Yeah, it's like a fun show.
That's such an awesome show. I love that show too. I don't know, like I totally agree with you, like on the whole, like, you know, doing some kind of activity, like some kind of fitness thing, because I feel like so I was having this conversation today, like Beachbody is very much like a wellness and fit company. They're most really about health, but they always like emphasize, you know, like for as much like coding as you do, like you really should like have a lot of you know, fitness done as well, and like be healthy, have a positive mindset. So like I kind of think of it as like the yin to your yang, like if you're like into the whole yin yang thing, like the more you push hard on yourself with coding, I feel like you need to kind of like bring that back and push pretty hard on the having fun and relaxation side. Otherwise, it's just gonna mess you up. Like you're just gonna become like way too stressed out and tired, and everything's just not gonna be fun.
I definitely agree. Yeah, I've been through such periods, and there is a burnout at the end often.
Yeah, want to avoid that. Tom says, would you get an Angular tattoo?
Not much of a tattoo person. So probably I will not. And like, if we change our logo, it's going to be a pretty bad choice too. I don't think we're getting there, but there is a risk.
That reminds me of one more thing. There was a guy, I think like this was years ago. I don't know if you follow Xbox or anything like that, Xbox 360. I think it's Peter Moore.
I don't know that person.
He was the guy who launched the Xbox 360. Maybe this is the guy. Maybe I'm wrong. But like the day it was supposed to come out, he got a tattoo and he said, "This is the launch date." And that was like a big thing for the community. It was just like, we're gonna launch this date. And like it was tattooed on his arm.
Very
So
cool.
maybe if you're like thinking about like doing a tattoo, you could tie it to a release date.
I know with
No
Ivy,
pressure.
with Ivy, we spent 2 more years working on Ivy compared to what we originally planned. This release date could be like very much off. So that's why we're not making, well, we're making commitments about releases now, release dates, but not necessarily about what features are going to be in the release.
Yeah, for sure. Looks like, oh yeah, like somebody brought up like the Twitter post. I guess like we can share the screen if we can bring that up. It'd be kind of funny. Yeah. Let's see here. Where's chat? Just get that real quick. Yeah. So this is the guy, I believe. Yeah, he got this thing tattooed on his arm. There's the it's Halo, I believe. Halo launch, right? Halo 2. This guy went on to become like a big shot. He was like at the highest levels of Microsoft for Xbox team, and then I think he went on to EA after that and became like the CEO. I don't know what he's doing now. I think he's doing football or something, but still a huge name. So yeah, I guess like we're kind of winding down to the end of this presentation and questions, but if you still have questions, feel free to ask them in the chat. We still have a little bit more time. But I'll just kind of like continue like with one more time, like for people who kind of came in late and probably, so we had some people who were going to show for today. And I know like they messaged me like last minute saying, will this be recorded and posted on YouTube? And so my answer to that is always yes. If you want to see any of the videos, they always go up here on youtube.com/hackbuddyorg. So just check out the meetups video section. Be sure to subscribe. I'll probably update this video because I recorded that a long time ago and I need to be doing more work on the YouTube channel anyway. But keep in mind, I just started working at a new company. So if you want to network with me, feel free to reach me here. This is my LinkedIn. And, you know, like I'm pretty friendly, I think. That's what people tell me. So, you know, you can just like reach out to me. I dropped a link in the Zoom chat. If you have any questions about this particular meetup or any questions you want to ask Minko, you can like reach out to me and I'll try to get you a good answer. You know, obviously the whole thing, this meetup group is about helping people become better developers, becoming better programmers. Next month, we're going to be looking at crypto. And the reason we're looking at crypto, just so you know, is because we feel that there's a lot of work being done there as well in the programming space. And so we wanted to just kind of keep an eye on things like the blockchain, how it relates with JavaScript, and what exciting things are coming out there. So we're looking at some of this. And for some people who are just business, interested in the business aspect, I think this might be fun to check out. If you want to network with us on our chat servers, we have Discord, which I love. I feel like Discord is really cool. You can do polls, you can like talk about like video games, you can talk about music, but also you can just use it like Slack very much. And it's got a lot of cool integrations. If you prefer Slack, you can use Slack, which we also support. There's Minko. Feel free to chat in either channel. And then one last thing, I know I've already talked about it a little bit, but if you like what you see, you know, from month to month, and you feel like, hey, this is really cool, I want to try this out, but I'm a busy person and I don't have enough time to like, you know, really, other than like just look at some source code, come to Team Hack and check out like what we're doing. and maybe like at a later date, if you feel like you want to contribute to some of our projects, we are using the things that we're learning about at these meetups, like Mongo and React hooks, Redux, things like that. We're bringing them into, our Team Hack projects. And then this can be a stepping stone for you, because you can learn about things about like pull requests, issues, how to like work with Git, and then maybe learn things like TypeScript or React or Angular. Again, this could be for your own benefit. Maybe you're not doing it at your current job, but you really want to. You just have one more project under your belt that you can showcase later, and then use that to basically get to the next level, or maybe open source professionally. So there's a lot of guidance, a lot of help. You're not by yourself. You're working with friends and teams. It's a good way to make friends. And other than that, feel free to just follow us on social media. And then, of course, do follow Minko. Minko, is there a good way to follow you?
Sure, yeah. I'm available on Twitter at mgechev. I'm mgechev everywhere. MGECHEV.
MGECHEV. I got it. Perfect. Okay, so yeah, please follow Minko. He's got a lot of great information. He has some really cool tutorial stuff. Congratulations on 100K subscribers for the Angular channel.
Thank you.
So he's, I think, on LinkedIn. So if you want to follow him there and see some of his updates too, it's really helpful. Again, very educational. So those are two good ways to. One last question here, I guess, or a couple. Maybe it's not the last, but hi, Minko. Besides JavaScript and TypeScript, what other language do you use?
I used to use a lot of Go in the past for my startup, and also at Google. It's another language by Google, so we are using it heavily. I haven't been writing code in many other languages actually recently, but I like to learn new paradigms. So, for example, spending some time using Elm or Haskell or any of these functional languages, looking at Prolog, not to become a master in Prolog, just to get this paradigm shift and understand how a brand new language functions.
That's actually an excellent question. Just like I'm actually really glad that you gave that answer, because like, I think for all of the people who are developing, we're always interested in like engineering patterns, design patterns. And so sometimes like just jumping out from one code base to another just to see how things are done, really, really, really helpful. I wanted to, I guess like for me, like too, like what do you feel are some great paradigms that you've learned maybe coming in? I don't know if you can share this, but it would be great if you could. But like maybe like after working at Google, like what are some things that like you've learned about coding in general, how to be a better coder? What are things that you see like some of the top people doing there? Like what are they kind of doing to like make code better than it was the day before, the year, whatever time frame you want to use?
Yeah, a couple of things. The balance that you mentioned is important, because otherwise people burn out, and even before they build something cool, they lose interest. So having balance and being excited, talking to people is pretty important. And
Sure.
Very frequently, if you look at how the industry has been evolving, it's mostly patterns like reoccurring all over again, with this state management libraries that occurred over the past 5-6 years, like Redux, NGRX, and all these. These were just how functional programming languages were managing state, because that's the only way they can manage state, having an immutable data structure and passing it down to a bunch of functions. So looking at different paradigms in the 80s or like 70s even,
Sure.
things just like continue reoccurring, and people just present them often with same things with different names.
Right. Like a lot of the factory functions and things like that, right? Like factory patterns, design patterns.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's really cool. Yeah. If you ever like come across anything, like on your side, you want to just share. I mean, and that might be like a pretty good post for later, like on LinkedIn. I think that'd be just really great if you could share like some cool ideas that you see like as far as engineering patterns.
Yeah, a lot of functional programming. This has been very popular recently, so you can see it applied absolutely everywhere. It's just even build systems, and yeah, we had a very kind of a nerdy reading club, a paper club with a colleague of mine who also turned out to be who's also Bulgarian, but that was just a coincidence. We had similar interests also in computer science. So we have been reading a lot about incremental computations with him. And it is just a way for when your data changes to perform the minimum amount of computations to produce an output. So for example, when you are using Webpack and you update one source file, how Webpack will perform the minimum amount of operations to compile your application and refresh the browser after that. Or in the context of JavaScript, it could be of Angular, it could be you update one property of your data model and how Angular could perform the minimum amount of operations to update the UI. It could be, for example, React uses its virtual DOM with reconciliation. Angular uses change detection. And these are all very shared ideas. Even Excel has the same problem. You update one cell and it can propagate across many other sheets even. So yeah, finding such patterns that are applicable across different domains is pretty interesting.
I love it. Yeah, like, and you reminded me of everything like you were talking about at the beginning, especially, cheap functions versus like having to like do like updates across like multiple children.
Yeah.
So that's really great. Like, I would love to just like personally, I would just love to, if anything, like if you have any tips or tricks along that way. One other question, I guess, and then Minko, are you good on time, or do you
sure, yeah,
have a hard stop?
I think let me just check my notifications, but I think I'm good for now.
Okay. So we have a question about WebAssembly. Have you explored it?
Yeah, I explored it before I joined Google, actually, like 3 years ago. Because I like compilers also, so I built a small language I built a compiler of the small language to WebAssembly. I can share the blog post actually about it. I didn't get too many readers of this blog post.
I wonder why. Like, so maybe like one thing that I've noticed is that like, some of the stuff that's coming out is like more complex. And so I kind of wonder sometimes like if people are finding that it is getting a little bit more difficult to like keep up with different things changing, right? Like you have JavaScript, then you have Angular, and you have TypeScript, and you have WebAssembly. This is like more a question for the group. Does anybody here want to like kind of give any thoughts on that? Are you all kind of out there like getting this stuff, or are you just kind of like struggling and hoping you find that right tutorial somewhere that'll help you out? Let's see here. And it's always funny to ask that question because nobody wants to admit, oh yeah, that's me. Like, so, if it is you, or if you feel it that way, just feel free to reach out to me afterwards. I'll be happy to just talk to you about it. It looks like we have one thing. Oh, thank you, Minko, for this, the developing. Oh, by the way, Minko's blog is really good too. He has a lot of great information here. So I highly recommend going and checking it out. And yeah, it is always good to get up a leg on learning and development. So, all right, last call for questions. If there are no more questions, though, we can pretty much call it a night.
Thank you very much for having me today. If you have any questions, just feel free to reach out on social media.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Well, thank you, Minko. This was awesome. It's always good to hear from you. And looking forward to when we see you next.
Thank you. Bye. Yeah.
Good luck with everything too at Google. Good job. And looking forward to seeing what your team comes out with. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah. Good luck too. See you soon.
Yeah. Thank you. Bye. Bye, everyone. Good night.